While I've talked an awful lot about Denia and what she may be symbolic of on the channel, we haven't really discussed much about Hiyuki, even though the end of 3.2 made it abundantly clear her importance, considering that Lucilla considers her the Academy's last line of defense. So in this video, I want to unpack some of the notes, the symbolism, and the theories I've built up for Hiyuki, and see if we can tie together some coherent paths forward for what she may do for the future story of Lahairoi. To begin, I think it's important to discuss Hiyuki's design, being that it is clearly reminiscent of a shrine maiden, something which is corroborated as every character thus far has designated her a Miko. Kuro has additionally noted that Hiyuki uses Suzu bells, which are small bells that shrine maidens use to do a variety of things, such as call upon deities and bestow positive energy. When you consider that it's already odd that there is an Ashinaharan character in Lahairoi, it becomes even more suspicious when you consider that she is a Miko of all things, since shrine maidens usually serve as a sort of conduit between mortals and divinity. And this ties into one of the long-standing theories I've had for the land of Lahairoi since the beginning of 3.1, which I've extensively covered in my video here, but of which I will also quickly summarize in case you haven't watched it. While it has been stated that Lahairoi does not possess a Sentinel but has an Exostrider instead, I am actually of the belief that they do have a Sentinel, but it wasn't a Sentinel that was meant to be in Lahairoi in the first place. And it's also a Sentinel that is inactive, damaged, or otherwise non-functioning. When you observe the map lore of the Time Lost Forest, it makes it abundantly clear that the Sentinel that the Exostrider was transporting exists as a very separate entity, and that three parties actually are actively aware of its existence. The first being Past Rover, the second being the Heliotic Six, and the third being the very upper levels of Star Torch Academy. When we look further at the map lore of the Rebirth Uplands, you'll be able to see that there is an unknown structure underneath the Exostrider sword Sundamir, made of the same material as the Exostrider itself, and being fed and maintained by the Exostrider's power. Considering the thumbnail for the 3.3 livestream, we're getting more and more evidence that this is a Sentinel capsule, very similar to the Mianlong chamber that Jiui came down in from Jinzhou, or Imperator's chamber within Resonator. And that of course is where we tie Hiyuki in, because Kuro has stated that Hiyuki has a connection to the Frenodian, but she clearly isn't the Frenodian Resonator because that's obviously Denia. However, when you consider that she is a Miko, which have always served as kinds of mortal emissaries for gods and such, it actually makes sense why she could be in Lahairoi. While this is pure theory and could be wrong, I suspect that the reason why Hiyuki, someone from Ashinohara, is in Lahairoi is that the Exostrider was actually transporting a Sentinel to Ashinohara, and had basically crash-landed in Lahairoi en route. We know that a majority of Ashinohara has been destroyed, and that they are down to their last city, Neo-Hanami, where Chisa is from. While it seems like Ashinohara does already have a Sentinel, I predict that it may be of a similar case to Huanlong, where it is a country that was meant to have multiple Sentinels. Perhaps Ashinohara was meant to have two Sentinels, and the reason why the country suffered so much damage during the Lament was that only one of them successfully made it, with the other never reaching its destination and perhaps still slumbering underneath Lahairoi. One of the reasons why I believe that this is the case is that in Japanese mythology, deities and gods often form as lovers or pairs, such as Izanagi and Izanami, Tatsuda Hime and Tatsuda Hike, Orihime and Hikoboshi, as well as quite a few others. This is all compounded as well with something that Lucilla says in the 3.2 segue, being that Hiyuki is the wish-granting Miko. We've actually seen this already in 2.8, because a pair of girls on top of Shasho Cafe talk about this wish-granting Miko, noting that she acts for the good of the nation, and as such must be pretty damn important. While I think that this may not necessarily be Hiyuki herself, but maybe one of her predecessors perhaps, as of course Hanami City was destroyed during the Lament ages ago, it really does lend some further credence that Hiyuki's aims may be very well tied to divinity, being the Sentinel as well as a Shinohara, which may be missing one. When we consider that the most likely place for the Sentinel of the Hyrule is Sundamir Lakebed, the fact that Lucilla reveals in the later story that Hiyuki constantly dives down into the active void matter zone beneath the Hyrule, which is the exact place that Sundamir, the Exostrider sword, penetrates into, is also a little bit suspicious. Now, one more final thing to discuss in regards to Hiyuki is when Kuro says that her Suzu Bell can perceive and utilize future possibilities of herself. This is particularly interesting in regards to the story of Hyrule because it has already utilized time travel. Within the past, we've seen Ameth and the Exostrider pave the way to stop Aleph 1, as well as a Grand Architect even doing some shady stuff within the Court of Savante space station. However, within the present, we follow Rover's current journey to prevent the destruction of Hyrule, and now, within the future, it may be that Hiyuki's almost divinatory capabilities is what stops the future cataclysm, Ragnarok, that will befall Hyrule. Considering that Hiyuki is listed by Lucilla as the secret ace up her sleeve in thwarting the Fraxidus' plan, I can only really see two ways that this will be the case. Either she is linked to the dormant Sentinel of Hyrule, providing her some kind of connection to a godlike power that would suit her role as a Shrine Maiden, or she perceives and can possibly manipulate the future, which would throw a wrench in the plans of the Fraxidus. The new Whimpering Waste token, clearly designed for Hiyuki being Glacier Chafe, also seems to corroborate this, being the cradle that holds the void, whose description states being firstborn, as if it were referencing a kind of young sentinel being born within the clutches of the void, dormant and waiting to be reborn, as we've talked about already. I found it interesting that the Grand Architect did not know about Hiyuki, which, when you consider how information such as Hyrule Sentinel is being kept as an utmost secret and redacted by the Academy, is actually not much of a surprise. One of the common theories I've heard for the 3.3 update when it comes to the thumbnail is that the structure is actually the Strider Gate, but considering that it is most likely the structure that has been hinted within the Rebirth Uplands, it doesn't really make sense that that is the case, because a lot of people in Hyrule know about the Strider Gate, but barely no one knows about the Sentinel. And if it was really the Strider Gate, it wouldn't have been redacted so heavily within the Rebirth Uplands lore. The only reason I feel that the Academy and the forces in Hyrule haven't touched the Sentinel and chose to focus on the Exostrider instead is that the system surrounding it is too complex, and perhaps it can only be unlocked by Rover, similar to how Rover unlocked Imperator space in Resonator. But what do you think? If you enjoyed the video, feel free to support me by subscribing, becoming a channel member, or even donating in the comments. As always, I hope you all have a great rest of the day, and I'll see you all in the next video.